Hello, as you may know if you've seen me talk about it on a previous video, I recently started an RPG. For anyone that doesn't know what I mean when I say that, I'm talking about a Dungeons & Dragons style. People sit around a table with a character, roll some dice, and some stuff happens. I say Dungeons & Dragons because it's the most recognisable of all the role-playing games, but it is nowhere near the only role-playing game. There are hundreds and hundreds of different types of role-playing games, and the one specifically that we are playing is Fate. And I've only actually played Dungeons and Dragons once or twice. Wasn't a huge fan of it. It's perfectly fine. It's bog standard fantasy setting, and it is the basis for a lot of these games. But mostly I've played other things. In fact, mostly I've played Rifts, which I've got the core book here, and I've got a few other books as well. There's loads of books for Rifts, but this is the core one. But there's a lot of them. I just want to talk about why I chose Fate. The fundamental reason I chose Fate is because it is principally a storytelling game. Now, Dungeons and Dragons and Rifts and a lot of the other games use a D20 system, or they use various different types of dice system. And the games, you have a character who has their stats, they have skills and abilities, and they have that sort of combat stats for fighting and all these different things, and you're rolling the dice to try and accomplish stuff. And they can get quite maths heavy and quite complicated. Fate is so the opposite of that. The Fate system actually has no setting. It has no setting. No character classes, no world, no sort of anything, any flavour as such. It's designed to have you add that on. So you pick a world and a setting on or whatever. It does say inside, if you're stuck, then think of what sort of movie would you like to play, what TV show. Pick something that exists and set a game in that world. And the game, as I say, is very much about storytelling. It's quite apt to akin it to a movie or a TV series. The players are supposed to be, their characters are supposed to be the heroes of the story. They're supposed to be competent in doing things. So the primary difference, I would say, from Fate to other games, whilst in other games you would say, I'm going to try and do this, and then you'd roll some dice. In Fate, the odds are you're just going to say, I'm going to do this. And you just do things. You are telling the story as much as the game master is. And you have, there's rules, obviously, but there's various ways in which you can directly affect how the story is going and character aspects and everything else in ways that you simply can't do in other games. In other games like Dungeons and Dragons, you have the games master or the dungeon master creates the world, or at least they know the world. They've taken the world from a book, and then they inhabit the world with a bunch of non-player characters, and they flesh out everything, and they know their way around. And they have story arcs and sort of mission setups and various things. You have to improvise to some degree because you never know exactly what the players are going to do. But yeah, they have this world that the players then jump into and have to sort of get round or have to solve whatever it is that's going on or flesh it out. And that way, whoever's running the game is sort of godly figure, just controlling everything about the world other than the players. Fate is much more interactive with the players. The worlds essentially are created by the characters themselves. Character creation, we've done 3 sessions of this so far, and the first 2 were nothing but character creation. We just did character creation for those 2. And the character creation fleshed out the world. We knew roughly the world we wanted to be in, and I gave the players essentially carte blanche, I guess, with the characters. More or less, they could be anything they wanted to be, as long as it was relatively logical. And then based on what they chose to be and the abilities they chose and the backstories of it for their characters, because character creation is about writing your character's backstory. You write your character's first adventure, and then two other players contribute to it in order to flesh it out and explain how you know each other. And so you write this kind of, not massively extensive, but you can write quite a complex story for each character. And the elements of that story add things to the world or change things that I thought I knew about the world. I've had to modify the world to fit in with those characters' stories, because those characters' stories determined stuff that had to exist or stuff that I was going to put in that then didn't make any sense. They created NPC characters, they created places, they had the power to create this world, and then I just came in and joined everything together, make sure everything makes sense, and then fill in all the blanks. I'm really not familiar with any other RPG that does this quite as extensively as Fate does. Fate is really is a collaborative storytelling experience, and it's quite difficult to get the players into that mindset. It took us from the first time I played, it took us a session or two to sort of really figure out what that meant. and just how much control you really have over the world. And you have to play in a completely different way that you would play anything else. In most of the games, you're just reacting to things. So the games master or the DM says, there's a troll coming at you, and you go, well, we better quickly react to this. Whereas this is, Fates is such a different system that it takes a while for people to realize I can literally do anything I want. It feels like you can do anything you want in most of these RPGs. They're like video games with no restrictions at all, essentially. But really, you're mostly reacting to the world around you or trying to get by in the world. Whereas Fate really is about the players having as much control, essentially, as you allow them. You can restrict it, but I don't want to. I want them to be creating this story. And it's a mindset that's hard to get into at first, but I think it flows really nicely once you start doing it. But why pick Fate over other systems that I love? And I love the Rifts. I love Rifts, I really do. I've got Paranoia, and I like that as well. Why pick Fate? It was partly because I was playing with a lot of new people I've never played any of these types of games with before. People of different experience levels. Some people with no experience of these games. Some people with lots of experience of the more rulesy games. And so I didn't know how to dive in. So I thought I'd give everyone something. So this is something that's essentially new to everyone, even though the experienced people haven't really encountered a system like this before. Second of all, those other systems can often get bogged down in the rules, in my opinion. I don't fully understand all the rules in Rifts, every little nook and cranny, and I house rule a lot of stuff. And I'm sure every games master house rules a lot of stuff in their games, just because some things don't make sense, some things don't quite work. The mega damage system in Rifts is a little silly in my opinion. It is. If you play with it as it is, you can do that, but it's so enormously overpowered that anything that's not mega damage it's not worth explaining here. It's just an odd sort of dynamic, sort of balancing act. Normally I house rule elements of that. So other games can be a little rules heavy, a little harder to explain. This is not difficult to explain. It is difficult to understand, as I said, but it's not hard to explain. The other thing about RPGs is they can feel very combat oriented. A lot of your skills and your abilities and everything are aimed towards combat, and it can often feel like you're just marking time until you can get to the next combat rather than being able to do that. I mean, you do have other abilities, but everything seems to serve combat, which I found especially in like D&D and things. I seemed to find that it's what it was designed for. So there wasn't much else you could do that wasn't in some way working you towards the next fight. And that's very video games. But, it's that sort of principle of you fight these little things to fight these bigger things to eventually fight the big boss. And it's all about fighting. Whereas Fate is very not about. I mean, there is combat in Fate, but it's very organic and it plays like is the storytelling basis the same as everything else. You tell the story of how your fight goes rather than saying I'm going to punch this guy, roll some dice, I'm going to attack this guy, roll some. No, so you have to tell the story of the fight, say what you're doing and how people are reacting and and all these things like that. And this is partly because there is no damage. It's a lot of things that are not in Fate. You don't have hit points, you don't have money, you don't have sort of stamina and things like these. You don't have the sort of minutiae. So you never in a Fate game you'll never have to explain where your character sleeps at night or feed yourself, or you'll never have to do any of the little things. You're always playing from scene to scene. You don't have to go shopping. You don't have to worry about paying rent or you don't have to worry about buying food. You don't have to worry about all the little details. It's just assumed that unless it's story relevant, your character is assumed to be able to take care of that, to just get out of the way. You don't have, when you're watching Game of Thrones, you don't have to watch every single time someone has to pay their taxes. You don't have to, you don't see Jack Bauer eat in 24 because it's not interesting. He has to, but it's not relevant to the story as such. So unless it's plot relevant, you don't need to go into it in Fate. So I feel that Fate lends itself much more easily to activities that are not about combat. Fate only uses one set of dice. It uses these fudge dice, or the Fate dice as they can also be called. These little dice, they've got 6-sided dice with blank, minus and positive, and they literally just mean what they mean. So you roll 4 of them and you'll have a positive score or negative score in total. And then you've got your skills that do various things. give bonuses and things like that. And they're used for everything. Everything uses those same 4 dice, and you're always adding the same numbers. Everything comes from the same pool of information. So no one thing is easier or more important or more focused than anything else. Everything you can do, and you can mold the skills. The skills are sort of generalized in a Fate game. There's little skills in the book, and they're kind of general skills that you add to depending on your setting. There's things you might need. So that, for example, there's no rules in Fate for magic, or it's like psychic powers or anything like that. There's no rules for that at all, because you're supposed to design it in the same vein as the skills. You'll take them as skills. And the skills are sort of generalized so that you can say, well, I'm going to use this skill to do this. I'm trying to do this, so what skill could I interpret as being able to do that? And then that's the skill you use. Also, I've never GM'd a Fate game before. I've played them, and but I've never actually run one. So I was very curious to see, sort of tell a story, because I am a writer, and I do like to tell stories. So I thought that would be an interesting way of doing things. It is interesting. It's very very odd trying to get the balance right. But yeah, no, hopefully it will continue well, and I'm going to write it up and put it in the blog, which I think I mentioned in a previous video. But yeah, that will be going up online at some point since I've written it up. I'm writing up a sort of novelised format. So that's Fate. That's the game that we'll be playing for the next weeks or months, or however long it goes on for. Hopefully, maybe some more people will get involved, and we'll be able to keep the group going, keep the story flowing. We've got a few story arcs created from the character creation that are the focus, and I've added in a couple of my own just so that the world is fleshed out. And yeah, no, hopefully it'll go on as long as we want to go on for. So I hope that was vaguely interesting. Hope you check out the blog when I get it up online. I might talk about this again in the future. But yeah, that's Fate, and that's what we're up to, and that's kind of why. I would quite like to play Rifts again. I'd actually like to play. Normally I GM because I guess I'm one of the slightly more inclined to do that, creatively minded, I guess. So I ended up GMing a lot, but I don't get to play as much as I'd like. So I'd like to play Rifts again. But yeah, no, it's just hard to pin down a group of people to sit down and play on a regular basis. Is quite tricky. But yeah, no, that's this Fate's going. Hopefully it will continue. So thank you for watching this video. Check out all my other stuff. I'll put a link to the blog. I've created the blog page on WordPress, but there's not much up there. But there's only the first post at the moment up there. But yeah, I'll put the link in below, and check it all out. Find me on Twitter and Facebook and all those other things that you might find me on. And check out all my other videos and keep an eye out for more stuff. Thank you for watching. The end.